Welcome to Working with a Disability, Workplace Accommodations, and Finding Your Dream Career. This is session 7 of the day. With us for this session, we have Jeff Sparks. Jeff was diagnosed with spinal muscular atrophy, and Jeff is the Director of Volunteer Engagement and Human Resources at Muscular Dystrophy Canada. Jeff, hello. We have Emily Chan with us again. Emily is diagnosed with SMA, and she works as a social worker at Holland Bloorview Kids Rehabilitation. We have Nouma Hammash here. Nouma is diagnosed with spinal muscular atrophy, and she is a social worker and works at Spinal Cord Injury Ontario as Regional Service Coordinator and a mediator. We have Stefanie Marinich-Lee. Stefanie was diagnosed with spinal muscular atrophy and is a lawyer by training and has worked in corporate diversity. Hey, Stefanie. We have Khalid. Khalid's back with us again. Khalid was diagnosed with Duchenne muscular dystrophy and holds a Master of Global Affairs degree from the Monk School of Global Affairs at the University of Toronto. He also holds an honors Bachelor of Arts in International Relations and Political Science from University of Toronto. He recently became a lawyer. And we have Dayle Sheehan with us today. Dayle was diagnosed with a neuromuscular disorder. Dayle is the lead designer at Dayle Sheehan Website Design and Social Media Consulting, as well as Dayle Sheehan Interior Design Incorporated. So thank you all for joining us today. We're going to talk a lot about working with a disability, workplace accommodations. So let's start with something as simple as, how do you bring up your disability in an interview setting, and how and when is the best time to disclose that for those who don't know or those who are maybe interested in seeking employment? Maybe we'll start with Emily.
Sure, happy to start. So I want to first acknowledge that disclosing your disability is never easy in any setting. So I really do, I want to acknowledge that. And so when it comes to disclosure, how everyone does it is a little bit different. So for me, I like to disclose during the sort of pre-screening process, if there is one, so prior to the interview. And I do this for a couple of reasons. One, because if it's an in-person interview, I want to make sure that the space is accessible. So I use a power wheelchair, and if there is no elevator and the interview is happening on the 3rd floor, I'm just not going to show up. I'm so sorry about it, but that's just not going to happen. And the second reason is I want to begin to have a seed that's planted in the interviewer's mind about, we are probably going to have to talk about workplace accommodations during the interview. So that's when I disclose, but like I said, everyone does it a little bit differently. And I think one of the factors that you want to consider is if your disability is visible or invisible. So again, for me, I have a very visible disability, but not everyone does. And so is it more appropriate for you, if you have an invisible disability, to disclose during the interview process, to make sure that you have those workplace accommodations prior to starting? Or is it appropriate to disclose prior to the interview? So I don't think there is a one size fits all answer to this question. And I do recognize that there are a lot of barriers that can come with disclosure, including fear of stigma and fear of, your employer thinking you might not be able to do a quote unquote good job. And so I think this is something that we can talk about later on in the panel, but those are just some of my initial thoughts.
Sorry, Jeff, go ahead. I was on mute there. I saw you raising your hand, and then we'll jump to Stefanie after.
Thanks so much, Sherry. So Emily's really actually, you still my top 3 points. So great job. Speaking from an HR perspective, I'll take off my NMB hat and put my HR perspective on. The other real positive reason in sharing your disability up front is that sometimes it can be an advantage to be hired as a person with a disability many corporations are really focuses on enhancing their workplace diversity, and therefore by being upfront, it actually could create a competitive advantage for you as an applicant in that process.
Stefanie, did you want to jump in? We've got a few of you who have some points, so that's great.
Yeah, I definitely want to reiterate what Jeff said, being mostly working in the corporate world and some government. If there are postings that indicate that they're open to hiring people with disabilities, 100% I would disclose it, even in my cover letter or during the application process. That's my vantage point. The other thing would be that I understand that it would be individually perhaps difficult, and may think that it would be a negative, but one of the other most important things is to also, before you apply, look into the employer. Is it an accessible place? If it's a great job and you really like it, investigate a bit online, because I'm not sure how others feel, but if I saw that something looked like it was not going to be an accessible location, it was in a small building or the office space was small, I honestly would not apply, because I'd rather go to somewhere that I know that there is at least an opportunity to have accessibility considerations. Thank you.
Dayle?
I just wanted to pop on and say something because I work for myself. But what ends up happening is that clients contact me and I don't know what they know about me. And so from there, that is essentially my employer. But each time I have to go through the process of redisclosing every single time. And sometimes the person knows all about me and they've been referred by a friend, and other times they know about me from Instagram or wherever they found out about me. But many times they've just been told I'm great as an interior designer or web designer, and they have no idea about the disability aspect of it. And with the interior design particularly, people are often very concerned about how I'm going to be able to do the job, which I know we'll get into later. But so for me, I often forget to disclose because I just think, okay, here we go. Here's another client. And I get rolling with the project. And then all of a sudden, I've found myself earlier in my career where I hadn't said anything early enough. And now I was heading to their home. And I'm like, I wonder how many stairs there are. I wonder if they know that I'm bringing 2 people with me, like just considerations that I definitely am earlier in my career. I forget sometimes that I'm in a wheelchair because I'm just going and going and going and living my life to the fullest. And then all of a sudden I thought, oh, I better tell these people, like I left it way too late. So now I make sure to try and drop it into my first consultation or find out how they found out about me. I encourage them to go to my Instagram so they get a better feel for who I am.
And just to jump in for a second on that, have you had mostly positive experiences by doing that?
Only positive experiences. And so
Perfect.
The good thing about that is that, every single time I have to disclose, I have to almost like, as much work as you do on yourself, you have to go through the process again. And you're like, okay, this person's not going to want to hire me. They don't think I can get in the house. They don't know how I'm going to do it. And it's always fine. And so it just is like a reassurance, but it's funny how you have to go through it over and over and over again to remember that.
Khalid, go ahead. You have your hand up there.
Yeah, I think, keep in mind, sorry there. I think it's important to disclose the disability if you need to. I think, it's, you don't want to go and interview to an inaccessible location. You want to, tell them that, I have this disability. Is your location accessible? Is it a place that I can get into? You don't need to give them too much information, I don't think. I mean, any interviewer, any employer, they're obligated legally to accommodate you, to what we call undue hardship, right? So, those are your rights. I think, I think an employer, and hopefully we can touch upon this later. I think people with disabilities bring a unique perspective to the workplace. I think there are a lot of benefits to hiring a person with disabilities. So I think, don't be scared, don't be shy. I mean, it is who you are. And I think, if the employer isn't really going to, respond to that or treat you differently, then the heck with them. They're not the person you should be working for. right? I think, I think, to the extent that, but I would also say, think about what step of the process you're in, right? If you're just in an interview process and it's virtual, then, you don't really need to say anything just yet. If you move on to the next stage and, you're going to be moving on to a more, essentially maybe possibly being hired by the company, then you can disclose it at that point. And I think the discussion of accommodation should happen, at the beginning stage when you first start working. I think it's very important you establish what you need, and I think at the interview stage, that's a good segue to do it. But I don't think you can do it every case. So, think about the context you're in, evaluate the situation. If you feel like you want to disclose it, by all means do it. But it depends on you. And what I want to get at, don't be shy and don't be scared to think, if I disclose it, they're not going to hire me. They're going to, treat me differently. You don't know that, and so it's very important you get it out there if you want.
Hi, I just wanted to jump in because I notice, just want to be very careful with the language relating to obligation to provide accommodation, because it's different in every province. The threshold in Ontario is extremely high. So I just don't want to give the impression that a small business that has a flight of stairs is obligated, because there are conditions around that. So we just have to be mindful of when we're using those kinds of terms. And that's all I wanted to just thank you very much.
Well, I think just, also keep in mind, and I don't know how it works in other provinces, so forgive me. In Ontario, we have undue hardship. So, I mean, obviously that is dependent on the situation, and obviously it's not apparent in every situation, but I just want to make clear that it's the accommodation process is a two-way discussion. And I think it's an employer side and your side. I think, on both ends, the employer at least has a duty to investigate first into what measures there are available, and go from there. So, that's what I was, trying to get at there.
Now to move on, I'm curious, maybe Nouma or Jeff or Emily, one of the three of you can, or even the three of you together can speak on this, about some of the support that you can get from outside organizations or things like that when you are beginning your job search or looking for employment.
Sure, maybe I can jump in if you want, Jared.
That'd be great, Jeff.
When I started my career, I worked with an employment agency that specialized in people with disabilities. So there's all kinds of headhunting firms out there, but it's really important if you live with a disability to find those organizations that have that expertise, not only because they can provide you with the right resources and support, but also because they have a network of employers that are open to hiring people with disabilities. In my case as well, when I started my first job, I also received some funding support from the provincial government to cover some accommodations, caregiving costs, and most provinces do have programs like this that will get you started in your career. But then from there, once you have that really first accommodation, then it's up to you with your employer to chat about the ongoing accommodations in the workplace.
Since I am on the direct funding program, so I can have the same attendants who come to my home, for example, go to my workplace to provide me with the support I need. In the beginning, when I started my job, there was a support person at work. And then unfortunately that role was taken out. So I used my own attendants. And sometimes later on, I did some changes so that I don't need them at work anymore. Like I would rely more on cold lunch, for example, instead of hot lunch, so that I don't have to eat it up. I had a metrophone procedure to empty the bladder that some of the ladies spoke about earlier. So I was able to use the washroom independently. With regard, for example, to the coat, I might ask my colleagues just to help me put my coat on and remove it when I come in the morning. Yeah, so at the end, I was able to manage without my attendant.
Thanks. The nice thing about this panel is we are all adults living with disabilities, and we're all working. It appears. So I'm interested, and I'm sure some of the audience would be interested to know what some of you think are the advantages in hiring somebody with a disability.
Hi, I'm sorry. I'm going to jump on this to the other point. I just wanted to give some of the individuals out there a resource if they're in the transition into getting work. Take advantage of any kinds of career fairs there are going on that are listed. And I would kindly say, even there is a Lime Connect, if people have ever heard of that organization, that will support people to connect with employers who are looking to hire people with disabilities, and that's throughout North America. So that's a great organization if people want to try that out. And obviously, the reason that ties nicely into why it is a good thing to have individuals who have disabilities within your employment is because there's a diversity of culture, a diversity in our workplace, and a diversity of ideas. Those are always the three categories that we would indicate when we were acknowledging or trying to recruit individuals through Lime Connect or other kinds of places when I was working with TD. So, and there is in each province organizations that probably would even be attached to that global one. So use resources that might be out of the ordinary as well. Thank you.
Could I chime in there? I know, in touching upon what Stefanie was saying, I was at a conference about 2 weeks ago, and I remember hearing about the Ontario Martyr Dimes, and I know that's not a Canada-wide thing, but it's an Ontario thing, and I know they have some employment supports there. I could probably throw the link into the chat if anyone's interested. It's another way, I think, another resource available, to you in the province if you need, I guess, make that transition. And I think they help with accommodations and whatnot. So good resource to connect with if interested. I think, and this is, what's been the highlight of the day is that, persons with disabilities bring, a different perspective to things. I was reading an article the other day and it mentioned, and I agree, is that, people with disabilities, have to be resourceful. That's another benefit. I think, another benefit is just that added perspective. I think, we see the world lit differently and there's a different lens to it. And I think, there's a talk of diversity, and I think it's very important to have diverse viewpoints. Someone with a disability, even a neuromuscular disorder, sees the world much differently than, maybe their colleagues who are able-bodied and don't have any, a disorder. So when, that's another perspective to keep in mind. So it's good to have a diversity of viewpoints, of perspective, and sometimes that comes in handy. I can tell you in my day-to-day work and, work as a lawyer, my perspective on, living with a disability, is, it gives me a good perspective to help clients who may be, who may have, similar disabilities and need help to navigate the community. So, it gives it added perspective to what you do.
Jeff, we'll jump to you, and then we'll jump to Emily. And then we have a question that's come in that I'll put to you guys. So yeah, Jeff, go ahead. There we go.
Can you hear me? Sorry, I'm having a few technical difficulties here today.
No problem.
So I actually do a lot of training around workplace diversity and the benefits of hiring people with disabilities, but two that come to my top of my mind would be around problem solving. Employers are looking for people with competencies around problem solving. As we live with disabilities, we're overcoming problems every day in our life. So we're really good at coming up with creative solutions for our own lives. And because of that, we're able to transition that skill set into our workplace and really be an asset to our employers. The other area is around just increasing awareness, customer base, suppliers. Many organizations don't often recognize that people with disabilities and their family and caregivers often support organizations that are disability friendly. So if we look at our economy, about 60% of our Canadian population is connected to somebody with a disability. So if we all stop shopping at stores that weren't inclusive, those businesses would go out of business. So by really supporting inclusive hiring practices, you're really building your revenue streams in your organization. And I think that's really important to share.
Emily, did you just want to add something?
Oh, sorry, Jared. I was actually gonna, Jared, sorry, I was gonna actually address the next question that I saw in the chat, if that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what I was gonna bring up next, about the resources.
Oh, I was looking at the question about applying to university, actually.
Oh, I meant absolutely, go ahead.
So I think just to give some context, this person is asking about any advice that the panel might have about applying to universities and thinking about what career to choose if that person feels like their wheelchair kind of dictates what type of work they want to do or not do. So excellent question. I think it's a very fair question. And the first thing I would say is ask yourself, what are you passionate about? What do you like to do? And how do you see yourself sort of working, in 5 years when you graduate? So I think like any other person applying to university, apply with the mindset of what is interesting to you, because if you're going into university or any post-secondary degree and you are in a field that you don't enjoy, then I don't think that's beneficial to anyone. And then there are very real sort of challenges that come with being a wheelchair user, but I think I would say don't let that be the deciding factor, so to speak. I think there are a lot of different ways to accommodate your disability, whether it's post-secondary, so talking with your disability center or your accessibility center. A lot of universities and colleges have really great advisors who are really willing to work with you to put those accommodations in place that will help you succeed in post-secondary, as well as the workplace too. You, again, as we've been saying earlier, you really need to be your own advocate. So, start by thinking about what you need, what are your accommodations, what would they look like, and then sort of, advocate for what you would need. And then I think I hesitate to say that, you have limitless options, but I think at the same time, you don't want to let your wheelchair be the deciding factor about what you end up pursuing in terms of your career, because I think there are a lot of options that you can work with. There are a lot of resources out there as well, and I'm sure my other panelists can speak to some of those resources too.
Well said, Emily. Thank you. I see that Stefanie wants to jump in here.
After this, I just wanted to touch on that point that Emily was making, where university, a lot of individuals going in, it's really a matter of what they're teaching you is critical thinking. So at the end point, what I'm trying to say is most types of careers or job opportunities don't have to take a specific trajectory. People are often told that they will have 3 different careers in their lifetimes, and that's often very true. I know it's for myself, was much different. I was in banking before I became a lawyer. So anyways, the point of the story is, I would say, definitely think about maybe where you'd like to work, and then match some courses that in that area if you're not able to take a degree solely in that type of work that you'd like to do. Thank you.
Dayle?
Sorry, I'm just unmuting myself. I'm not great at technology.
No worries.
I, just to kind of speak to both the points just made, I definitely let my first trip to college be completely decided by choosing a small school I felt I could manage on my own. It had some things that actually did work for me that were great things to take into account. Like, for instance, I'm not physically strong. And at that time, I didn't have a power wheelchair yet, and I didn't know if I would get one in time for school. So what I ended up doing was picking a school that had a small enough campus that the wheelchair accessible dorms were within the school. And that was greatly made my life so much easier, because every morning I was physically already at the school. So it took away some of the physical barriers of getting to and from. So those are the kinds of things that I did take into account. However, my advice, as far as what I took, I picked something that I thought, okay, it's a desk job. I will be able to do this for the rest of my life. And that's a good thing for me. And I went into social work, which is a great profession, but has no element of creativity the way that I was looking for it in my actual passions and what would make me happy in my life. So what I ended up doing was finishing my college program, graduating, and realizing I didn't love it. But what I did love was interior design, which felt very impossible. It felt like something that was not, because the internet was around, but not as commonly used as it is now. And so, you know, now I've completely taken my business model and turned it into things like it's predominantly design boards online. So people are fulfilling their own design. I'm not actually going to homes oftentimes. And I completely turned it around into something that was possible for me. But I also really discourage people from deciding what they're going to do for the rest of their life just because of their wheelchair or their mobility device. It makes for a really long life if you choose something just because you think it's the only thing you have the option for. So, sorry, go ahead.
No, I said, I think that's great advice. I think that's fantastic. And I was going to open it up to a couple more questions here that will fall. I think most, like, to Stefanie, Nouma, I'm kind of looking at you here. Somebody's inquiring about what resources are available for work accommodations in Ontario. And there's another question that kind of touches on that. And are there employment support services available through SCI Ontario, which I think Nouma would be able to answer that directly. So yeah, work resources about work accommodation.
Yeah, so there are some employment services that are funded by the government. So they help the person starting from exploring what they want, doing their resume or cover letter. They sometimes the workshops to prepare them how to disclose your disability, to negotiate accommodation. So these are done by some employment services funded by the government of Ontario, like that's what I know. SCI Ontario, yes, they have, we have an employment services department, and there are other few agencies also that provide such services.
Thanks. And then the other question we had was one question. Let me see. Sorry, I've got my computer's not being great here. Does anybody specialize in designing spaces for people to work from home? Applied, especially now with the pandemic. Do any of you know of any specific companies that are doing this? I don't know if this is necessarily more of a work question or a home accommodation question, but that was.
I'm not really aware of, but maybe an OT would be the first step. That's what I would usually recommend.
Yeah.
And then somebody like previously also posted in the chat box, organizations that are really professional volunteers, so they can build things for you and they don't charge for the labor work. So that's like one of them is designability, and I think that's under Marshall Dines. And another one is very, very known, like I can't recall the name now.
Is it the Tetra Society? The Tetra?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, the Tetra Society, yeah. So these can also build things. They work with the person, see what they want, and together they design something and they build it.
Thanks, Nouma. Hamira, did you have a couple questions coming in?
Yeah,
too,
I do see some common questions, and perhaps maybe I'll just go with the COVID-19 work from home one first. And
Yeah,
that
please.
was the asking the panel, what are your thoughts in terms of accommodations were made during the pandemic for many people to shift from in-person or in-office work to remote, and that has been an accommodation that many people with neuromuscular disorders had previously been asked and not honored. But what do you think about remote work for those with physical disabilities?
If I'll jump in if no one else wants to. I think that if the individual likes working from home, I think it's fabulous. I was very lucky in my workplaces to have the flexibility to not go in every day. And that isn't afforded to everyone, but also not everyone wants to work from home. They like the interaction that they receive in the workplace in terms of the socialization. So I think that if it's something that you can do and you're interested in, go for it. I think it would be fantastic.
Can I jump in? What I would say is that, and I can tell you from my personal experience, I spent, so when you're licensed in Ontario to practice law, you have to do what's called an articling year. So that's about 10 months. The Law Society in Ontario, they've lowered that, reduced that given the pandemic. So it was about 9 months. And I can tell you, why I was one of the very few people in a virtual articling experience. And I could tell you firsthand, it really allowed me to do more than I would have thought possible if I had to go into the office. I was able to access files quite quickly. I was able to do all the work from home. I went in the office maybe once or twice a week to get, certain documents that I needed. But I can tell you, it reduced the strain on my energy. Not having to go into the office every day to commute, that in itself was beneficial. I can tell you that, it allowed me to just, easily manage, care with my attendants. That was a benefit, but I think, it depends on the person and it depends on you. And I think in the age of COVID, it depends on your level of risk and how much risk you're willing to take, right? So, it varies from person to person. But I can tell you that, there are a lot of benefits from being able to do so. We're talking about wellness and care. I think that's, working from home at least once or twice a week can really help to that. The limitations, and these can be easily overcome. You're not having that day-to-day interaction. At times it can be a bit lonely to be working from home 24/7, as a lot of you probably might feel. But there are ways to do so, to overcome that. So keep that in mind, and I think the important thing is in this era is just that you're staying safe and staying out of a workplace that could potentially get you really, really sick.
Jeff, did you want to say something?
Yeah. So just to reiterate, it really is a personal preference. Working from home is not for everyone. I'm very lucky. I'm one of the people who was able to work from home pre-pandemic. So I've worked from home for 15 years, and it really works well for me. But what I've seen throughout the pandemic and heard a lot through my networks and human resources is that now that the entire world is working remotely, we're seeing a lot of mental health implications. And knowing how to balance your mental health is really important. Some people really need that face-to-face interaction on a daily basis, and the Zoom meetings just don't cut it. So that is one piece of advice for people to think about when they're making that decision about working from home, is really how does your own mental health work? How do you maintain that mental health? And do you need that face-to-face interaction to stay healthy?
I agree. Emily?
Just to reiterate, yeah, very much a personal preference. I have the privilege of working from home 1 day a week, and I think there are, advantages and challenges to both. Some advantages being, not having to arrange your own transportation. You can literally roll out of bed and at 8:59 and log into your meeting at 9. Wonderful, love that. But at the same time, yeah, like Jeff mentioned, the downside could be, isolation, lack of social interaction, a decline in like mental health. So I think it's important to weigh your options and think about what works best for you. And if a hybrid model works best for you, then I would say advocate for that and sort of explain your reasons why. And now you have, I think, a lot more weight behind your advocacy given the whole pandemic and working from home. A lot more people are again seeing the benefits of doing a hybrid model or working from home. So it really does sort of depend on what you need and what resources you have access to as well. Because, you know, for attending care, for example, not everyone's on direct funding. So what if you have limited hours in a week that your attending can come to your workplace, for example? So all different things to consider.
Perfect. Thanks, Emily. Hamira, you have a couple questions that came in, I believe.
That's great. Jared, I guess this one isn't a question, but I'm seeing a repeated comment that's being sent directly that there's an appreciation from parents and young adults and on the line saying they've really appreciated seeing the showcase of or the broad scope of different careers mentioned throughout today, from starting off our day with a professor, interior designer, lawyers, graphic design artists as well. So there's an appreciation for that. And then the next question is that I see 3 individuals commenting that they had to enter early retirement due to their disability. And if anyone had experiences with that or anticipate that, what are their thoughts around early retirement due to their neuromuscular condition or physical disability?
I'm not quite sure if you could expand. I'm not sure what they're trying to ask. I as an individual have stopped working. My disability for myself anyways has gotten to a point where it's just not feasible. I'm 52. I completely assumed I would work till 65. So I think it's an individual's choice and how best their body work and life management.
That's great, Stefanie. I think that's exactly it, is the acknowledgement. This person saying they had an adult onset neuromuscular disorder and that prompted them to enter early retirement and something they didn't anticipate, for sure.
Maybe I can add as well. I think it's really important for people to understand what options are out there, because many workplaces have long and short-term disability programs that may be eligible to you as a person with a neuromuscular disorder. They may not be. Every program is different, but we need, as a person who does have disease that affects our energy level, ability to maybe work a full career, but we need to do planning for retirement, not retirement planning. You may need to think about, am I going to be able to work till I'm 65? Maybe you need to look at different investment strategies. See what's there for you to access long-term disability programs so that you are ready if and when that happens.
Thanks, Jeff. And we have about 5 minutes left, 4 or 5 minutes left. Just another question is about finding a career for people who, let's say, are taking this for the first time, as with a disability looking for a career. Where would you start now? I mean, it's been a long time since I've actively looked for a job myself, so I'm also interested to hear what you have to say. Nouma, Emily, maybe.
Yeah, I can start, and Nouma, feel free to jump in if I miss anything. First of all, networking is super, super important. A lot of jobs might not be posted externally. So a lot of the times it's about who you know. And, there's a lot of great websites like LinkedIn where you can build your network, Instagram, reaching out to people that you see as a role model, for example, in a career field that you're interested in. Feel free to, message them and say, I'm really interested in learning more about what you do. Do you have time for a coffee chat, for example? And that can be, virtual or in person if it's more appropriate for you to meet with them in person. But I would also say, you know, for me, I found my job through job searching websites like Indeed or Glassdoor. And a lot of organizations, if you're interested in working in a specific place, have like email notifications that you can sign up for when there's a new job posting that's available. So take advantage of those resources that you have. And I think, yeah, very much networking would be my number one piece of advice. Networking with folks with disabilities in different career fields, and, you know, folks who are pursuing a career that you're really interested in. So those are my thoughts.
I'm just going to say that was a fabulous overview. And to remember that finding a job is often said is a full-time job. It's very difficult to just casually look. I remember being on different websites knowing, okay, the government's always post on Friday. I'm not sure if they still do, but just sort of making it a part of your day, even searching one job a day or searching one site a day, just to start the ball rolling. If it's and then that's also how you can also find different types of careers. I would also, even if it was a job that I wasn't going to be personally doing, I wanted to know what kind of job that was. And it was also a good way for individuals who are pre-entering the job market, potentially in their university years, to see what kind of positions are out there and check labor market reports, what types of jobs are trending, etc. Thank you.
Thanks, Stefanie. That's great. I know that I personally landed in my career now as a graphic designer. I initially went to school to I wanted to become a teacher, a high school teacher. That didn't work out. I ended up finding a job in a print shop one summer that I loved, and kind of one thing led to another, and I just stuck there, and I found that it was also a job that was reasonably open to accommodations for me, something I could do kind of from anywhere. I mean, I've worked from the beach, I've worked in the snow, I've worked at home, I've worked on a plane, and it's nice to be able to do that now. And you do have to think to yourself that not everybody does have that luxury to do that, but I'm very grateful that I have been lucky enough. We have about 1 minute left, so I'm gonna jump to Jeff real quick, and then that's it.
Great, thanks, Jerry. So I think something else is to really start early. Many high school, middle school and high school have career exploration programs. I was very lucky. I've known since I was in grade 8 that human resources was maybe my field of study. And that was because I had the opportunity to participate in interest inventories, career exploration activities to find careers that really match my interests. The other thing that I had to consider was balancing my interests with my abilities. So I would have been a great medical doctor, but I knew physically it wouldn't be an option. So I had to take that out of my options from a career perspective. And I think my other third advice around career exploration is to have summer jobs. Many people with disabilities don't participate in summer employment experiences. People say, oh, you have a disability, you don't need to do that. Starting a career when you're 16, exploring job opportunities is really important, and we all have abilities. So don't let your disability hold you back. Start as soon as you can.
Thanks, Jeff. And thank you to all of you for being a part of this panel today. We have, I believe, one more panel left, and then our keynote at the end. And it's been a great day so far.